It's Radio Free 501c, the voice of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm Cecilia Sepp. Don't forget to subscribe. We're on all your favorite podcast services. This week, I'm joined again by Mike Bober, CAE of the Pet Advocacy Network, because he's just too interesting not to have back. We're talking about Claim Your Expertise. Welcome to episode 213. Hey everybody, it's Monday, October 9th, and that means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm a certified association executive and a certified nonprofit professional. Welcome back to the podcast and this week's exciting topic. Before we dive in and I introduce my guest, I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience, wherever you may be. And thanks to everyone for listening this week. So returning guest, he's already been on once this year, and now he's back because he's just way too interesting not to talk to. Mike Bober from the Pet Advocacy Network is here, and we are talking about Claim Your Expertise. But before we start that part of the conversation, Mike, welcome back. And would you like to say hello and tell us a little about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Cecilia. First of all, thank you all to the audience for having me back. And I have to say, the last conversation went so well that it was nice to see that this one was able to come together so quickly. You know, I think one of the things that I really loved about the last time we spoke was that it really kind of could have gone in any number of additional directions, but one of the things that I took away from it really was this question of, you know, you've got the tools, but not everybody is ready to be taken seriously about things. And I think that's something that all of us need to kind of make peace with. So it's a good opportunity for us to talk about it. As you said, I'm the president and CEO of the Pet Advocacy Network. We are a 501c6 trade association representing the responsible pet care community. We represent everybody from food and product manufacturers to retailers, distributors, service providers, and breeders and suppliers of animals. And yeah, I'm also a CAE, thanks in part to some of the great advice that you gave, actually. And I am just eager and looking forward to having this conversation.
Well, wonderful. And always glad to hear that some of the other things I do is helpful to someone get ready for CAE and maintaining it. So,
Yes,
and I think we all know, just kind of putting in another plug for the CAE, how much I support that, because it is really a way to differentiate our profession.
it is.
And that's a nice segue into our topic today, which is claim your expertise, because that's a way that you can set yourself apart as an individual and
Mhm.
your area of knowledge and experience and expertise. So there are 4 E's that you have shared with me, and we're going to talk about all of them: experience, education, expectations, and engagement.
That's right.
And I loved how you said expectations and engagement are kind of the throughput. So that's kind of like some of the outcomes that you might get.
That's
So
right.
let's start at the top, Mike. Experience.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, one of the things that I really kind of want people to understand is that, you know, not everything in my life is alphabetically by fours, but it does seem like a lot of the time it's just a really good way to kind of encapsulate something and to kind of help me fix it in my memory. So hopefully it has that similar effect for other people. But yes, for those who've experienced the 4 Fs, now we've got the 4 Es. I'm sure at some point I'll have 4 As to come back with, but at the very least you can meet me at the 4 H. And the 4 Es, the idea of claiming your expertise, really did kind of grow out of that idea of engaging with lawmakers and staff. For me, you know, we would bring people in every year for our legislative fly-in. In fact, our most recent one just happened on September 20th. And one of the things that we would hear time and time again from people coming for the first time was, you know, I'm a little bit nervous about this. Who am I to be going in to talk to these people about these things? And it's that sort of self-negation, that sort of minimizing of yourself, that really I think had such a negative and counterproductive uh, impact on these people's experiences that it became incumbent on us as their association to help them understand that they are experts, and they do have a valuable voice and an expertise that needs to be shared on issues that they have worked on their entire lives. They didn't necessarily realize that in a legislative office, their issue may get this much attention over the course of a month, whereas it's something that they live and breathe on a daily basis. So,
And I
yeah.
think that is an excellent point. We need to remind each other that we are smarter than we give ourselves credit for. A lot of us do not give ourselves the credit we are owed because we are looked at, or we might think we will be looked at,
Mhm.
as somebody who's blowing our own horn or too big for their britches or just like
Yeah.
trying to tell everybody how wonderful they are. And maybe we should do that more often. And I think we need to encourage each other. But I also think we are always our own harshest critic. And that gets in that way of acknowledging our own expertise.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And it's something, it's funny, a college friend of mine was sharing something on social media this week about what's known as the ambition penalty. The idea that especially women, if they're speaking up, if they're advocating for themselves, there's not so much the fear that they don't know what they're talking about. It's the fear that they're going to be penalized for having the temerity to do so in the first place.
Mhm.
And the chilling effect that has really goes a long way toward explaining the idea of the confidence gap. And that's
Yeah,
something that I think hopefully concepts like this go a long way toward helping people to understand that you do have value, you do have worth. And if you're not going to advocate for yourself, it's all too easy for everybody else to diminish and dismiss you.
that's right. And I think I'm sorry, diminish. I made a
Yeah,
new
it's
word.
I'm going to have to work on that phrasing because it definitely doesn't roll off the tongue.
But although we do have this new compact word, diminish,
There you go.
but we do diminish and dismiss women
Hmm.
more often. And as a woman, I can attest to that.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think one of the issues with that is other women buy into it. Like, oh, well,
Hmm.
we shouldn't say anything. We shouldn't speak up for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I love that term, the ambition penalty.
Yeah, I had never heard it before, but it was something that as soon as I read it, it's like, yeah, that fits.
And that can also, and I'm sure that applies to men too. I don't think
Hmm.
that's just a woman thing, but I think anybody who's coming across as ambitious, people
Hmm.
in today's world see ambition as not a good thing.
No.
That we then measure success by how much money we have, or how many companies we've bought, or how many likes we have on Instagram.
Yeah.
And
So
you
you should get it, but you shouldn't want it.
Yes, right. It's exactly. And it's like, and don't talk about how hard you worked for it or how
Hmm.
you won it. And then people try to make these things look very easy
Hmm.
when they are not necessarily easy. I mean, we all have the opportunity to succeed, but we're not all going to succeed at that level
Yeah.
that you see
Yeah.
these people like on Instagram, some people become super famous on Instagram very quickly,
Hmm.
and then other people, they get like 5 followers, so it
Yeah.
doesn't work for everybody. And I think that's another thing. But coming back to the topic,
Yeah.
as always, Mike and I are going off in another
Well,
direction
but
here.
I think I do think it all ties together. And again, I mean, I think the way to address this, to kind of inoculate yourself, is to claim your expertise, and that starts with that first E, which is experience.
Yes.
It requires you to really kind of be a little bit introspective, to take a step back and to look at everything that has brought you to where you are today makes you who you are.
Mhm.
Your experiences, your lived experiences, your learned experiences, all of these things together make for a completely unique package that no one else in the world can claim.
Mhm.
And the thing is, in certain conversations, that is going to make you the expert, whether you're acknowledged or not. And the trick here then is getting to the point where you go beyond you know, I've got a point, to I know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And that's that flip of that mindset that we really try to accomplish with our fly-in participants, is to get them past the I have something to say to the I have something to say.
Mhm.
And it really does come down uh, to building that confidence. And I think for us, the first E, the step one is experience. And what we encourage people to do is to take a step back, to kind of, really walk yourself through the journey that has gotten you to where you are. Do you have 10 years of hands-on experience? Do you have, a personal anecdote of a time when you were directly affected by the topic you're talking about? Do you have published materials that are out there in the world for people to look at to see that you know what you're talking about? And the
Mhm.
thing is, even if the answer for any of those questions is no, that's not a reason for you to discard your claim. What it is an opportunity for you to think about, okay, so what do I have that makes this something that I feel the need to talk about? Because if you've been driven to talk about something, if there's something that you feel strongly enough about that you want to engage on it, clearly you've got some version of expertise that you can bring to bear to the topic. And even if that expertise is simply, I've been around this my entire life, it's still got value. And the trick is learning how to frame that and how to package that in a way that you can then share it with people to help them understand why you're claiming that expertise in the first place.
Well, and you just reminded me of something my friend Agnes Amos Coleman told me years ago.
Hmm.
She is also the former co-host of this podcast when we were called Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia.
Hmm.
And she's written several books.
Hmm.
And I said to her, I do all the short form writing and I really enjoy writing and I would love to write a book, but I just wonder if I have anything to say that no one else has said.
Hmm.
And she said, of course you do, because it's your point of view and
Yep.
your experience. So, of course, you have something to say and share. And so you should do it. Have I yet written that book? Not yet. I keep
Oh.
making notes. I haven't sat down and done it yet. But well, if people in my family would quit breaking their hips, that would
Mm,
be helpful. But they're all doing well now.
good.
So we're getting on that. But that's really the thing, is really recognizing we're still, as you just said so well, we all
Hmm.
have our own experience to contribute to
That's
a
right.
topic or a
That's right.
question, and we have something valuable to share. And it sounds like the education step, which is step number two
Uh-huh.
of our four steps, is really the thing that was really helpful for your members when they're getting ready for a fly-in.
Yeah, that's right. That's the interesting thing about education as one of the four E's is it kind of goes both ways. On the one hand, it is an input. It is, one of the things that may shape your claim to expertise. But on the other hand, it's incumbent on you to then turn around and transmit that education out in a way that helps people to see you as an expert. Your education is what brought you to where you are today. Your educating of the people you're speaking to is what's going to help them understand you to be someone that they should be listening to.
Mhm.
And so for us, in talking about the four E's, the education, yes, there's the tips and tricks, yes, there's the, helpful hints, but there's also the element of it that says, you know, I think you've got a perspective on this topic. I think you've heard something from other people. Now let me share this with you.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that I think can be challenging, because there is sort of a bit of a predisposition in a lot of rooms to ignore or to talk over, or to get to a point where somebody is basically invisible.
Mhm.
I know you just touched on that in your newsletter that went out last week. That seems to me as something that really kind of requires, this is the step that I think requires the greatest investment on the part of people to claiming their expertise, is kind of getting over that hump and insisting that their voice needs to be heard.
Well, and great. Thank you for mentioning last week's newsletter. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
absolutely.
So, but it's really a complicated issue too of getting people to speak up for themselves,
Yeah.
because you can educate people about how to get their message across, but can you educate self-confidence? Can you
No.
educate self-esteem? Can you educate developing a thicker skin when
Mm.
people might react badly toward you for speaking up or towards what you have to say? I'm a very outspoken person. Anybody who's ever met me knows that.
Mhm.
I recently did a nonprofit executive spotlight for someone who's looking for a job. And after we finished, he said, "Now tell me the truth. Give me a critique. Was that good enough?" And I just looked at him and said, "If it wasn't, I would have stopped you and told
Nice.
you right away, because I've had people, I've stopped them 5, 6 times and said,
Mhm.
no, you got to say that again, or we're just going to throw this one out and start over." So I really have no problem speaking up. But
Mhm.
when we're trying to do that, it's really difficult when we live in an era where people are starting to push back and say, we're not listening enough to experts.
Yeah.
But it's like another conversation I had last week on a networking group. Just because somebody's a doctor doesn't mean they're good at it.
Yeah.
Just because somebody's a scientist doesn't mean they're good at it.
Mhm.
And if we do some research, we can find there's lots of examples of people who have, positions of respect that and professions that we look up to not being very good at it. So, you do have your expertise, like with your
Mhm.
members in the pet area, whether it's pet care or pet products, they have their experience. They do know what they're talking about. Even if
Mhm.
it's a narrow area in their own mind, they probably have a lot more to offer. It's very similar to when I used to work at the Academy of Otolaryngology years ago.
Mhm.
We did something called ENT Outreach, was a marketing training program for the doctors to market their practices. And I would say, oh, well, you can go out and give a speech like at the local chamber of commerce or a garden club. And they would say, I can't do public speaking. And I would say, well, you do grand rounds, don't you?
Mhm.
That's all that is. It's a presentation. And then the light would go on in their eyes. Oh my gosh, she's right. I do that. So getting people to see how what they do translates to another area is also an
Mhm.
important part of education, in my opinion.
You're right, and it feeds directly into that third E, which is expectations.
Mhm.
Expectations really exist on both sides of the equation, and they can be tremendously helpful, or they can be a huge impediment to truly claiming your expertise. Certainly there's the expectations of the individual, like you just said, I can't do public speaking, or this person doesn't care what I have to say. Um, but the converse of that can be existing even in the same interaction is a legislative staffer waiting to hear from someone because they've come in with the established resume that says, I've got 20 years on this subject. There's an expectation going into it that this person does have some sort of expertise or some sort of wisdom to impart. And so, kind of getting over expectations and maybe acknowledging them but not allowing them to rule the conversation really is an essential part of claiming your expertise. If you go into a meeting expecting that people are going to shut you down or ignore you or dismiss you, you're going to come in smaller. You're going to come in either, in a defensive crouch, or you're going to come in ready to shrink and just, kind of play the role that's already been dropped upon you. If instead you transcend those expectations, or you instead choose to embrace your own expectations of the meeting, which is, I'm going to go in and I'm going to tell them, here's who I am and here's why you should be listening to me. Then instead you've reframed the conversation in a way that you're often going to find that the person on the other end is kind of compelled to go along with whether they want to or not.
And I'm so glad that you explained the expectation step so clearly, because I was like, well, whose expectations,
And
mine
that's the
or the
question, right?
audience?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think it is for both, because we don't want to have expectations that we're going to be ignored, but we
Yeah.
also don't want expectations that everybody's going to just go, oh, wow, exactly what you said. We're going to do whatever you tell us.
Right.
And that's actually kind of a scary situation to be in, too.
Yeah.
People
Yeah, it
are
is.
just like doing whatever you tell them, because then you're like, whoa, they need to think, so that expectation that what you're bringing in, your experience and expertise, is going to get people to think,
Yeah.
not just do what you tell them. And I think that's another expectation that we need to get out to people.
That's a good point. Yeah, and there's a version of claiming your expertise that I think applies to organizations, 501c groups and trade associations. And in that case, then the expectations element of it really takes on a whole nother level, which is expectations of what the tone of the conversation is going to be before you even go in. I represent an organization that has members who for various reasons, are demonized by various groups out there. And when my members go into a meeting, in some cases there's an expectation, that they're basically the monopoly guy on steroids, rubbing their hands together, looking to pick people's pockets when they're not looking. Um, but it's important to kind of go in with such an element of transparency and engagement that they can very quickly put those expectations to bed. It kind of ties back to that first F in my four F's of legislative engagement. You need to put a face on things in order to get to a point where prejudices and expectations can be set aside and a more constructive conversation can take place.
And do you also try to help people manage their expectations of the impact they're going to have when they're going to a fly-in? Like, oh, sure, you're going to all these meetings,
Mhm.
but it's not necessarily that we're going to get the outcome we want.
It's definitely part of the process for a fly-in. Managing expectations really in any interaction is so important because this is stuff that we may work on a daily basis, but for our fly-in participants, it's something that they're carving time out of their day to do, maybe the only time the entire year. Certainly if we're doing our job right, they're engaging more frequently than that. But for somebody who's going in without a real, kind of a full expectation of what the likelihood of something moving is, it can be a daunting process, and it can be kind of demoralizing to know, okay, I'm coming back for my third fly-in, and oh look, we're talking about the same issue again because it didn't pass last time.
Yeah, it can't. Yeah, that is such a good point.
Yeah,
Lobbying and advocacy can be so demoralizing and discouraging and disappointing because
yeah.
it's really, if you watch any movie from the early 20th now about how government works, it's like you will see. It's like I tell people that comedy, Thank You for Smoking, is like a
Hmm.
documentary
Oh
about
yeah.
lobbying, and people are like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Afraid so."
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so it's
Unfortunately,
deep. Yeah.
I think Frank Capra really sold us a bill of goods, but
Yeah. Yeah, he did. He did. But when one of the things I take away from Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is
mhm,
here's this guy thinking naively the
mhm,
world is one way, but it's really different.
mhm.
And that's really already in the 1930s, government was like that. So I
Yeah.
think that's really, it takes a lot of patience and commitment, and
Yeah.
you have to be in it for the long haul.
Well,
And
sure. I mean, it's the same when the same plot comes back around in Legally Blonde 2 60 years later, you're dealing with something that's really kind of a universal truism.
yeah, and that's so funny you mentioned that. I just watched that again last week.
I watched it with my girls. They uh
Oh my
they they
gosh.
didn't enjoy it as much as the first one, but they definitely enjoyed the DC shout outs.
Yeah, it's like it was kind of yeah, I have to say I agree with them. It's not as charming as the first
No,
one.
no. I
Where
I
the
love Dana Ivey though. I'm a big fan of anything she's in.
Oh yeah, she is so good in that. And I just, and I do love the character, the Reese Witherspoon's character, her enthusiasm and positivity.
Yes,
She
yes.
just keeps getting back up even if she
Well,
gets knocked down.
and
So
she's a great example of a character that's willing to claim her expertise.
yes.
She's somebody who is so easy to be put in a box and dismissed, and yet she just perseveres and she kind of takes it as a challenge to show people that their expectations were based on something that was a prejudice of theirs and was not in any way reflective of who she was.
And and I think that's a great point because people underestimate her
Yes.
because of her positivity and her love of fashion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people just underestimate her. And I think that the L character that she plays in
Mhm.
Legally Blonde 1 and 2, is a great segue into engagement
It is.
because of the way that that character not only owns her expertise, but she is able to go out and talk to other people and
Yes.
use her expertise to convince them to support her activities.
That's right. That's right. She brings them to where she is. And that is that fourth E, engagement. It's all well and good to have all of this stuff nailed. You can have all the experience in the world, you can be the most highly educated person in your field, but if you're not out there engaging people on it, if you're not out there helping them to understand not only the what, but the why, then you're really not going to be able to effectively claim your expertise. You're at best going to be a footnote.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what we're encouraging our people to do. We don't want them to be a valuable resource. We want them to be a valuable partner. And part of being a partner is showing people that not only do you have that expertise, but you have the ability to help them apply it in ways that are beneficial to them as well.
Well, and I think the great thing about the four E's is how you have outlined how you use it to help your members
Hmm.
find their mojo or
That's a good way
their
to put it. Yeah.
expertise,
Yeah.
to say, hey, I do know what I'm talking about. But I think this is also a great thing. Not only can other people look at this and say, well, I could help my members too,
Hmm.
but I think individuals can use
Oh,
this
absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
totally, so don't want to put you on the spot because this is not a gotcha kind of podcast, but do you think, do you have any examples of how like an individual might be able to take these four things and use them to find their own mojo expertise?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think this claiming your expertise is really just a broad way of saying, um, you know, making yourself ready to show up.
Mhm.
It's making yourself ready to be taken seriously in any conversation. And that can be, as simple as a salary negotiation. It can be when interviewing for positions that maybe, you don't have 100% of what they're looking for right there on your resume, but you do have the ability to help them understand how what you do say and what you have done really does help them kind of close those gaps. It can be for things like leading a charge for some sort of a local effort. Lately I've been inundated with a lot of things from my daughter's PTAs,
Oh,
and
wow.
claiming your expertise in that sphere is important as well, because it really does make the difference between an ask that goes nowhere and an ask that convinces people to step up and to make the fall festival a success.
And and that's a great example. I have a lot of that in my own life experience in my neighborhood. I'm
Mhm.
active volunteer at my community association, and so
Oh yeah.
people try to bring their expertise. I stepped away from organizing our annual Halloween event this year. I've been doing it since 2017, and then somebody else stepped up and said, "Oh well, I'm an event planner.
There
I'll
you
do
go.
it." It's like great, great, wonderful. So she'll probably do an even better job than we've been doing the last
No.
few years. So, you do have to let other people own their expertise too, because
Yeah.
we none of us knows everything. And
That's an interesting point. And you say it, and when I hear you say it's true. It's all well and good for each of us to be, striding through the world like giants, claiming our expertise left and right. But there is a transactional element to this. And that is, I can claim as much expertise as I choose to, but there needs to be a reciprocal acceptance of that expertise in order for it to truly have an effect. If I claim my expertise and the response I get is, yeah, right, or worse, deafening silence, then claiming the expertise hasn't really had its intended effect. So there does need to be an element of again, in that final E, in the engagement of bringing the other person in the transaction to where you are so that you can move forward together.
oh, that is great, great point. And sometimes I was just thinking as I was listening to your comment, I was just thinking sometimes you have to claim expertise
Hmm.
because it's kind of thrust upon you.
That's true.
Because
That's
you're
true.
doing work and you're starting to become recognized in that area. without realizing it, because maybe you're not working toward becoming an expert on a topic, but
Mhm.
then people start to look at you as an expert on a topic and you're like, oh, I guess I am. It's sort of like having greatness thrust upon
Yeah.
you, as the old saying goes. Sometimes we have our expertise thrust upon us because we're doing the work.
Mhm.
And so we don't really think about that. So, an example from my experience is ethics. I've been doing an ethics course with Cheryl Ronk for a number of years now.
Mhm.
And people will call me up and say, you know about ethics. I have a question.
Mhm.
And so that actually makes me feel good because all this work I've been doing, people are noticing it. So,
Yeah.
so if somebody's thrusting your expertise on you, you should own it.
Well, I mean, that was the experience that I had here at the Pet Advocacy Network. I mean, I came on board as a government affairs person.
Yeah.
That was my background. I understood the legislative process, but by a series of actions that happened in and around the organization, I ended up being elevated into the position of president and CEO without any real background in association management. That's where the CAE program became an invaluable resource for me because I had this expertise thrust upon me, and so it became a necessity for me to go ahead and actually earn it. To backfill with the expertise that I needed to do the job that I'd been asked to do.
See, and that I love that example because you were put into a position and you knew you didn't know everything. So let me go find out what I don't know. And I wish more people thought like that. It's like
Wow,
Donald Rumsfeld used to talk about the known unknowns.
that's right. That's
Like
right.
we know what we don't know, so we better go figure it out. So I just think that's wonderful. So,
Yeah,
well, this has been, as usual, a rousing conversation.
I love it.
And I say as usual because you and I tend to have other off camera conversations that we
For
enjoy.
sure.
So it's always great talking with you and having you back. And I know you'll be back again.
Oh,
Maybe, I don't know if everybody caught your comment earlier about meet you at 4-H, but I thought that was great.
well,
For those people in our audience who are not living in the United States, you may not be familiar
ah,
with the 4-H Club. And the 4-H Club is a club where young people can learn about farming and animal husbandry
that's
and
right.
those sorts of things. So you may not have 4-H in your country, you may have something else. But that's why I laughed so hard when he said 4-H earlier,
I'm glad you caught
because
it.
we got the 4 F's and the 4 E's and the 4-H clubs. So but they don't have a bar at the 4-H club, so you can't meet there for drinks unless you're
Sorry
having
about that.
probably. Yeah. So you have to go to another club for that. And Mike, I'm sure you will come up with another list of 4 things that we can talk about in the future.
Well, I
So,
appreciate these opportunities, Cecilia. It's always great talking to you, and this is just a terrific program. You've put out some really valuable stuff for people. So if I can be even a small part of that, I'm happy to.
oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I do enjoy doing this. I love talking with people about all kinds of different things. And people have questioned how my mind works on occasion.
You don't say.
That's another thing. But thank you, Mike. I really enjoy it. And you bring so much and in such an informative, easily accessible way.
Oh, thank you.
And as you know, because you have been on before, I like to ask my guest for the one thought you would like the audience to take away today
Hmm.
and how they can get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more or just connect with you.
Sure. I think for this one, the one thought is actually really easy, and that is whether you realize it or not, you do have expertise that is valuable and is something that other people need to hear. And the trick of it is to get yourself to the point where you're comfortable claiming that and then engaging with people to bring it into the world. If you're interested in getting to know more about the Pet Advocacy Network, the work that we do, you can join us at petadvocacy.org. And if you're interested in picking my brain and finding out what I like besides Legally Blonde 2, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I am just Mike Bober.
Yeah, great.
Thankfully, there aren't that many of us out there.
It's it is nice having a unique name.
Exactly.
I agree. So, well, wonderful conversation as always.
Oh, thanks for
I
the
want
time.
to You are welcome. I want to thank you again for joining me. And we have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. So don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss anything. We're on all your favorite platforms. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com, and we're always happy to set up a conversation. If you are, like Mike, seeking education on nonprofit management, check out our education program, the 501c League. It is so big, it has its own website, the 501cleague.net. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And on behalf of myself and Mike, we'll see you next time.